Hello!
Hello, this is Joelle. I'm Mouse.
And this is Julianne. I am Weens, and we are with the mouse-and-weens-podcast, and we are so happy to be on Victims and Villains.
That's right. Here we are, Victims and Villains. We're excited. Woohoo!
Welcome to the show where we talk nerd, we talk hope, and we speak nothing else. I'm your host, Captain Nostalgia, and this is episode 338. We're going to be talking about Rebecca. We're going to be touching on the brief 1938 book by Daphne Dor.
Oh, I don't know how to pronounce names. You should know that by
French. That is my wife, who is my co-host for this episode, and we're also going to be talking about the Alfred-Hitchcock film, which you guys can currently stream on YouTube right now. We'll provide a link in the descriptions, as well as the updated 2020 Netflix film starring Armie-Hammer and Lily James. This is your official spoiler warning for both of those films. But please help me in welcoming our guests. It is. I don't think I've ever had sisters on this show.
Wow. Right. First for everything.
We just seem to be on a roll with first for everything this year. So welcome.
Thank you. Can you tell we're sisters? We do the exact cadence. Thank you. We're so happy to be here. This is awesome that you're doing this, and we love your podcast. So this is going to be super fun. We are honored to be here.
Thank you. I'm honored to have you guys here. I've listening on and off to your guys' show for the better part of a year, and it's so interesting, the humor and the comedy that you guys bring into it, but that you guys are also willing to kind of step in and talk about deeper topics. And not every sibling, I feel like, can do podcasting. So how did the idea for you guys to get behind mics come about?
Cool. Well, this is Joelle. I'm Mouse. This kind of came from my brain, I guess. I started finding podcasts, and my favorite one back in the day went off the air. And as I was searching around for something that I wanted to listen to, I couldn't find what I wanted to listen to. And then I hatched the harebrained idea to start one with Julianne, who is my favorite person to talk to whenever we get together. It's just laughs and serious. And so it's all those things you mentioned. And I'm like, let's just record this for posterity's sake and just to see where it goes. So that was almost 3 years ago. And here we are. And yeah, it's really fun. I love it.
Yeah. Ditto. And then I heard that there's something called podcast fade, where people kind of fade out, and it happens in year 2, is what you're saying?
I don't know. I've read that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that we're all still going, because it's been great. It's been so much fun.
Interesting. So we're a little bit older than you guys, and 2016, 4 years, almost 5, and I've never had that podcasting fade concept even phase me to where I'm like, I just don't want to do this anymore. There's something very therapeutic about getting behind a microphone.
Exactly. I agree. Yeah. It brings us together too, because I'm down in San Diego, she's up in Los Angeles, and we live 2 very different lives. I'm a mom of 3. I'm married. I'm in the suburbs, and she's single in Hollywood, living and working in the film industry. And so it's fun to talk, but then to really get into the subjects on the podcast, I think brings us closer together. Would you say?
Yeah. And then we have the shared history, which, you just already have this built-in comedic vibe or something that we understand in that way. And then we have some of the shared stories of our childhood. And it's kind of cool that we're able to have this friendship now, where we might not have been able to do this 15 years ago or 20 years ago, where we're adult enough to be able to talk about issues and not have catty sister fights and
right. All the sibling rivalry is kind of in the past. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been good. It's a real fun development of our relationship.
Yeah.
Hey.
What about now? Do you two? Let's hear some stories about you. Here comes the end. Do you have rivalries outside of the podcast where you're like, oh, I don't know if I could record today, or look at me, I'm getting into it?
No, I don't ever have those days. And I actually had the chance to record with my sister and my brother-in-law this past July, and we did the Wedding Singer episode. And recording with your sibling is significantly different than recording with anybody else, solely because, like you guys talked about, like you have that history there, and it takes a lot of maturity to get behind a microphone and have those conversations. So I'm thankful to have not only you guys on there, but on here today, but also to have experienced and been able to do a podcast with my little sister.
Yeah.
Cool.
And there's something I will say, and not to get too psychological or get too off topic, but when you have a microphone in front of you, there's also almost like a third person buffer, right? Where you're not looking in someone's eyes of your family and going, let's talk deeply about this subject. You kind of have a third person, the microphone and a potential audience, maybe of two, hopefully.
That makes sense.
Right? Does that weigh in your mind?
You're absolutely right. And I mean, it depends on the person, I feel like. And our most recent episode that we had done prior to this one was our spinoff podcast. And before we started recording, I was sharing about an experience that I had with our editor in chief, recording with him for the first time. And he had talked about just how casual it had felt afterwards. It's like once you put a microphone in front of someone, like they can just go right off and be fine with it. And then you put a microphone in front of other people and it's just like it frees up. So sometimes that microphone, that it works beautifully as a buffer, and sometimes it is hard.
Yeah.
It makes things a tad bit more complicated.
Right. I know. In the beginning too, when we started our podcast, we decided to stay anonymous so we could really let it fly.
This would be my sister talking about herself.
No, I mean, we were both just talking about all sorts of off-color stuff just to get it off our chest. And then we realized, we need to go public and say our names. And so we definitely had a lot of immaturity in the beginning. So we've kind of grown through that too. And now we edit ourselves a bit. You know, we do understand there's an audience out there, but it does give you different levels of freedom with what you're saying too. So it is interesting. It's been a fun thing to go through. My gosh, growth and all the stories, and now it's there forever. I love that it's out there living forever.
Sometimes, and then sometimes you put out a couple doozies and
yeah.
Don't I know stories about doozies?
Yes.
Yeah. But where can people find the podcast if they want to listen to it and check it out right after they are done hearing this episode?
Yay, great. We're everywhere you can find podcasts normally. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places. Our name is spelled Mouse and Weens with 2 E's. So you have to spell it all out. And just Google us. You'll find us everywhere. And let us know what you think.
Go ahead and drop them a 5-star written review. And let's jump in to talk about Rebecca. And I know my wife and I have a special relationship with this movie, and now I can also say that I read the book, so I can actually say that I have a relationship with the book. Did you guys have any kind of like relationship prior to us approaching you for this episode?
No, although when I first saw your note, I think we were going back and forth on social media about something else, so I thought you were making a joke about me and the fact that my middle name was Rebecca. So I was off on a different tangent with that. And then I thought, is he saying I'm like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farms? Like I'm too, the suburban housewife lady. I was in a whole different headspace. And then it dawned on me what you're actually asking. So that's where I was. I don't know. Jules, did you know much about this story?
No, I didn't. And I love Hitchcock. And I'm these are these shameful, like I'm in the film business moments where you go, ooh, I missed this one. So,
but I'll speak for you, Julianne. She went to film school, so she did have to do some Hitchcock deep dives at times, but just not on this movie.
I did, I went to film junior college school. So, and then I started working right away. So it was half school. And this one did not come up, and I haven't seen it until doing the research for this moment right now. Yeah.
So,
but it was awesome. Both of the films. Do you want to talk about one first, like the older one? Because that was the first one we watched.
Yeah. So that's the way we watched it. My wife is kind of a novice when it comes to certain movies. And so I loved Hitchcock growing up. Hitchcock was one of the first filmmakers that kind of stroked my love of film as a medium and cinema. And so when we got married, I was like, oh, you have to watch this movie, Psycho. And she was kind of turned off at first by the story or the name of it. And we got to the end and she realized it was directed by Hitchcock. And she was like, oh, hey, there's this movie that you should see called Rebecca. And it's based on this book by this. She's French, right?
Daphne du Maurier. I thought she was English, but I could be wrong.
But yeah, so we said that we ordered a copy of it on Amazon. We watched it like the next weekend. And I mean, this I feel like is kind of a cinematic blind spot for a lot of people. For this book being considered an American classic, it's one that I feel like slides under the radar a lot because people don't really know about it. I feel like that's the surprise of getting this movie was this new film from Netflix was kind of a huge surprise because I had never heard anyone ever talk about it or acknowledge the book or the Hitchcock movie.
Yeah, Erica, how long ago did you find the book and how did you know about it?
So I read the book in a modern fiction class in high school. It was like an elective class that I could take, and I love reading, so that was fun to have, a high school class with books you actually want to read as opposed to Shakespeare, which is awful. Just hard to read when you're 16.
How dare you?
I know. Uh-oh. When was the last time you read Shakespeare?
Doesn't matter. It's Shakespeare.
You've never read Shakespeare. So yeah, we read the book in my modern fiction class, and my teacher showed us the movie, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I really like this. And then, as an adult and buying my own books and adding to my collection, I found that book finally, which was kind of difficult to find. And then, yeah, like, I really loved the movie, and Josh is like, I'm trying to watch, like, more, like, classic movies, and I'm like, here's one, here you go.
Good.
There you go. All right, and I looked her up, and she is English. She's an author and playwright and inspired Hitchcock with Rebecca and also The Birds, a short story.
Interesting. That's something that I did not know, and The Birds is one of, I feel like, his best movies. So that's really interesting that there was a two-peat, and that's like a 23-year difference between the two movies.
Oh, wow. Really?
Because this Rebecca came out, what did you say, 1940?
So this is 1940, Birds is 1963.
Okay, 40 to 63.
And the novel came out in 38, so he picked that. That must have been pretty popular, and Hitchcock ran with it from there. Woo! This is, I just thought it was such a quiet and beautiful movie. The cinematography was great too. Everything was very bold, and just wide, vast shots, which I love. It just felt very cinematic from that time. Not a lot of, I love this about Hitchcock. He didn't seem to do a lot of those quick cuts. So things hung on characters for a while. So you got to get in their world and their mood without the cutting too often. Do you agree with that?
When you're talking about from a technical standpoint, I guess I should let listeners know I love looking at things like cinematography and lights and sounds. My wife is not so much there, so I just want to preference that. Mm-hmm. We view movies in two completely different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, because I really just care about the story. And as long as the story is really good and the acting is really good, then you could have the biggest flaws in, like, technical movie putting togethering. And I'd be like, oh, but that character was just awesome. Like, they grew so much. And then Josh is like, the CGI was terrible in that movie. See? How did you not see that? And I'm like, I wasn't paying attention. I was watching the beautiful story unfold.
And I'm more like you. That sounds like where I come from with movies too. I'm just like, oh, did you see how much she loved him? It's like,
and it's like, I think once you know, it's hard to go back. Like if you know a little of the inside of the filmmaking process, it's hard to train your brain just to not pay attention.
Sit back and enjoy the story.
Yeah, it's hard. Unless it's so good that it just takes you. Sorry, I just yelled in your ear.
No, that's good. No, we're sharing
I
a
got
mic.
excited. But yeah, so you're the same way, huh? That you look at it technically.
I love looking at films technically, and I think that you're absolutely right when you're talking about Hitchcock's version of this property, to where it has time to breathe, and just the transitions that he is able to create in this. There's one scene in particular, we watched it this morning, where Mrs. Danvers and Mrs. De Winter are having a conversation, and maybe it's not Mrs. De Winter. Hold on, guys.
No problem.
I love it. We took notes too, but we didn't take notes on the first one. We took notes on the most recent one.
We kind of took notes on the differences too. It was interesting to put them side by side in the brain.
Okay, I'm gonna edit this in there, and it's a 5, 4, 3, 2. There's one scene in particular where Beatrice and Mrs. De Winter are having a conversation in the 1941, and Beatrice says that she, referring to Mrs. Danvers, seems to really have adored Rebecca, and there's just the way that he blacks Beatrice out, and the lighting just focuses around this worried look on Mrs. De Winter's face. I just think is absolutely breathtaking and stunning the way that they do that. And for the newer one, it's obviously it's in color, but it's like the color palette that they use, it feels both very modern and very like classic Hollywood in the same respects, and but it also kind of has this like weird way of like doing like flashback sequences while also still being in the present, and they overlap one another. And that, to me, I just feel like from a technical standpoint, kind of it was like, all right, first that's a cool idea to showcase this story, and then once it kind of gets more and more into this like running gag throughout the entire movie, I'm like, I'm so over this like scene transitions, the way that they're doing things. Like, just tell a cohesive narrative.
Well, yes,
all
and
fancy gimmicks.
Sorry to cut you off. Well, I know that if it's what you're talking about, where they do a quick flashback to remind you, like I do remember that in the most current one where they showed the what's the thing called, the buoy, the lifesaver with the boat name, and then they were talking about the boat, and then they flash back to where you would connect the boat in the water with the boat with the lifesaver from previous, and then you go, that wasn't that long ago. We could put 2 and 2 together.
Right. And then the scene where she was being teased by, who was it, Mrs. Van Hopper, the rich lady who she was the ward of. She and her friends were teasing her about how she ran off and made a scene at the restaurant, and it had just happened. I thought the same thing. I thought that was odd.
And it's almost like you're doubting the intelligence of your audience at that point.
Yeah,
which the first one did not do.
No. And I think that kind of goes into the way that we have transitioned as a movie going audience, from the way that we were making movies in the 40s to the way that we're kind of making everything more modernly, where we feel like we need to force feed our audience, and we can't just let them assume that they're smart, so to say. And I feel like there's literally only a 7-minute difference between both cuts of these movies, and when the last like half hour where he's like on trial, all of that stuff feels so much more sped up than it does in the actual original Hitchcock movie. And the book, I mean, it feels like it takes forever in the book sometimes to kind of get through that trial stuff.
Yeah, the first one, I feel like they did not focus on the trial very much, but it left you a little more suspenseful because they weren't spelling it out, what's going on. It left this quietness of going, ooh, what's going to happen? The second one gave you a lot more. Well, how did you feel? So what are you saying? I think the second one focused more on the trial. It seemed longer and it seemed more intense and it was more heightened. And Mrs. Danvers was in that. She was on the stand versus the other one where she was not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
what was in the book?
So I honestly don't remember if she was in the book for the trial. Do you?
She was.
She was.
Because I believe in the book she was the kind of the linchpin that gave off about the doctor.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I wonder if she was in the original movie. Now I can't remember.
It's so funny. I'm so used to not being the spoiler, but you already gave people the spoiler alert. So we could talk about all the plot twists and everything, right? Yay! Like, oh, good. I'm always used to signing non-disclosure agreements about plots and everything.
Yeah, Julianne works in on TV sets lately, and they're all episodic.
Yeah, and the movies are the
dramas,
worst.
so she can't talk about what's happening.
I've gotten in trouble for that, where you just take a picture on set of something benign, and someone will see it on Facebook. Like Disney lawyers will all of a sudden they're calling you, going, "Yeah, you need to take that down. It's scary,
Nice.
but here we're free."
Yes. And so I feel like the original 1940, the present, because we were talking about this as we were watching it. There are certain things that I feel like the original did that was much better, and then there was other things that I feel like the current one did that was better. So I guess starting off, before we get there, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victimsandvillains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victimsandvillains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. Welcome back to Victims and Villains. We're jumping in to talk about the Rebecca movies and just going to touch very lightly on the book from time to time. Continuing on that conversation, I feel like I want to know where kind of everyone is right now. Which is the definitive version of this story in your eyes?
I am, I guess, more of the modern ilk. I preferred the remake, the current version out on Netflix right now. I like the colorization. I like the lighting. I like the modern characters. I like the fashion. I liked looking at Armie-Hammer.
Oh, me too.
I like the love scenes, the romance, and I loved there was a few suspenseful moments, maybe a little more so than the Hitchcock version. A couple little jump scare moments and a little more build up. And I liked the resolution a bit better. So that would be my vote.
I thought so. I know that there's a beauty to old Hitchcock that it's hard to compare because there's the quiet spaciousness. You could put it on and feel like you're really getting into the quiet suspense of it. And it's beautifully shot, and everything that Hitchcock chose, in my opinion, meticulously chose angles and the way that he would edit in his head. So he would know the story he wanted to tell before, in order not to give control over to editors. So he would know exactly how he wanted to shoot each shot ahead of time. And I love that. So you could tell it's all very stylized and beautiful in that way. But I love the tension of the Danvers and the main. And they said her name once. Her name is the wife.
She
the new
doesn't
wife
have a
is
first
Caroline.
name?
She doesn't actually have a first name. It's
Okay.
never mentioned.
So, which is interesting. I'm sure that'll lead into like the feminist part of this talk, but I like the Danvers character and the Winters because I was confused going, oh, she's a nice lady and she's helping out, like before she wore the dress down the stairs at the ball. That character seemed less cold and kind of one note throughout the whole film to me. It felt like a little more developed and a little more manipulative and nuanced and subtleties. And so that's what I like better about this modern.
I agree. I think that reading the book, Mrs. Danvers is so sinister, and like watching the Hitchcock movie, it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing there? You're supposed to be like the scary maid who loves the old wife and is out to get everybody. But I think they really describe that better in the new movie. But I really like the old movie more for like the broad scenes of the grounds. In the book, they spend so much time talking about all of the flowers and the trees and like just how everything was manicured to perfection. And that was a huge part of the book, was the scenery. And I felt like the new movie had such potential to show all those beautiful colors that they talked about in the book. And it was so lackluster when it came to like, there are no flowers. And so I was a little disappointed that there weren't any flowers.
Yeah, they could have done a lot with getting ready for the ball. I mean, they were out in that beautiful garden area. I was kind of excited to go around the grounds, and they didn't. Although the coastal scenes were beautiful. So
I loved the coastal scene.
Yeah, that was a little
I
different.
spent more time on that. Yeah, I noticed that in the new one they had their scene on the porch where the sister and husband came, and it looked a little like a Monet shot where they had a little bit of the flowers in the background. And then they had that beautiful walk outside with the hedges, that perfect like topiary gumdrop look.
Oh yeah.
And that was the only real outside of the castle because I wanted to see the grounds. They shot it at a really amazing castle in England, I want to say. I looked it up before.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
It's like, structurally speaking, it looks like stuff that we've seen before that is English, whether it's been for some reason like the Winchester is kind of like in my head right now, which is the backdrop for Xavier's School of Gifted Youngsters from the X-Men movies. Kind of feel. But I am actually going to be the black sheep here, and I'm going to say that I am sticking with Hitchcock. And I will politely disagree. I feel like while they do tension a little bit better with the modern one, but there is something that was just hauntingly eerie about Judith Anderson, who plays Mrs. Danvers in the 1940s, where she just doesn't have to say anything. She just looks eerie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did anyone
And-
pick up a Frau Blücher vibe from her from Young Frankenstein? I thought, oh, this is
Kind
what he
of.
based her on.
Kind of. And the like that golden age of like the 30s to like the 50s when it came to creepy, like they were able to cast really well. And I feel like also too the gentleman Laurence Olivier, I think is how you say his name.
Olivier, Laurence Olivier.
Get that
We're
French.
old. We're
Olivier,
old people.
yes. I feel like he just did a much better job as Mr. De Winter. I feel like Armie-Hammer's portrayal was just very stoic, but
Politely disagree.
they did a better job with like his like guilt and like humanizing him a little bit more, because I mean this is a dark story about a husband that kills his wife, and you don't ever kind of see that aftermath in the book or the Hitchcock movie, and you kind of assume that from that standpoint he's a sociopath, and yet in Armie-Hammer's case you can kind of see that like the fact that he killed his wife, like it deeply troubles him. Like we have him sleepwalking in this one, which wasn't in either 1938 or 1940. So it's like the PTSD element that they were able to bring into the modern one was better utilized and made him feel a bit more relatable in this version.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, that seemed like a theme, the sleepwalking, and yeah.
Well, I thought they kept talking about his rage and his anger issues. I never felt that that came out in either character of, ooh, watch out for his bad side. And it kind of, he got angry a couple times, but did you guys pick up on that as being like?
Yeah, it wasn't, they also talked about his anger issues in the book, and he doesn't really get angry. I feel like he flies off the handle at an appropriate time, because he's obviously dealing with the stress of, is anyone going to find out that I accidentally murdered my wife? But I mean, all the times that he flies off the handle, I feel like are warranted. Like, I know when I'm a little hangry, I'm going to start freaking out because things aren't the way I want them.
It's so cute.
I don't know. I do feel like the newer movie, like, his character was, like, better. Because it's supposed to be a romance. So, like, in the first one, he's just like, he says the line from the book.
Come fly with me.
No, like, in the book, he says, I'm sorry, this engagement isn't how you thought it would be. There should be violins, and I'd be making violent love to you behind a tree. And it's like, that's the only mention of them having an intimate relationship at all in the book or in the old movie. So I liked that his character was more...
The romance element.
Yeah, there's more romance there.
It feels more natural in this one than it did in the original one.
Yeah, and the only time I felt like there was a sense of real love and partnership, because I'm always looking at it from the female perspective of like, oh, this woman seems like she got trapped into this weird abusive vibe. And it wasn't until they showed the home movies in the Hitchcock one that it showed them like being warm and friendly and cute and laughy and jokey. And I go, oh, okay, well, that's obviously a passage of time they didn't show for us, but we're seeing it now in these home movies, and it looks like they were happy.
Yeah, and I sort of chalked it up to, that's how they did it in the old days. They, couldn't touch each other until they were married, so everybody had to get married first, and then they consummate the relationship. But here, well, I guess they don't consummate the relationship, but there is a question mark. There's a lot of rolling around in the sand and stuff, so...
You want to see it happen?
Well, no.
Jeez. She's a dirty one.
Illusion. It alludes to it.
Yes. Well, at least they woke up in the same bed together. I don't know if they even did that in the Hitchcock one, huh?
Boy, but he sure rolled over all the time. He never cuddled with her. I was waiting for some spooning. None of it.
You even mentioned that. You said he needs to... You wanted Armie-Hammer on you.
I wanted Armie's arms all over me. Sorry. Continue. I'm sorry.
All
See,
that
here we
stuff
go.
happens off the screen.
In the books, they had separate bedrooms.
Yeah, well, they have that in here as in the Hitchcock version as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she's always in separate wings than he is, and she like makes a comment on it, and she's like, well, she just kind of takes it as normal. But when she comes back after they fight in the Netflix one, it was like, oh, okay, they're more kind of giving us the traditional American relationship where these people are sleeping in the same bed together.
Right. Yeah. Really, in the book even, because I would think, in the movie you can't really show it to an audience back in those days, but in the book.
So a lot of, like, I don't want to say like royalty, but like higher ups in Europe, specifically in England, that was normal, is to have 7 bedrooms. Like the king and queen of England have separate bedrooms, and they just come in and have fun and then go sleep in their 7 bedrooms.
Right.
See, now that could be a good, I mean, that's fine.
I know, the older I get, the better that sounds, actually.
Stop worrying. Go to your own room.
Yeah, right. Get out of here.
Wow. I mean, it's also funny because, like, you have to, like, at that regards, the king and queen, they're obviously working together. So, you know, spending all day with someone.
Yeah.
I don't would want that space and that solitude.
Yeah, it's nice. And not to have someone's arm over your mouth when you're sleeping. You can get to the business and then afterwards. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I love the sleepwalking theme, though, because there was such suspense there. What was he doing behind the doors, and what was Mrs. Danvers protecting? And
what was he doing behind the doors? Was that a secret room? Because he went into the room in the new one. Do you remember?
I think he was going into the West Wing where, like,
okay.
But
that's what I got. That's what I took away from it too, is because like the West Wing was like
forbidden.
Mm-hmm. It was the forbidden fruit of this movie.
Mm-hmm. Now we have a note of Mouse wrote this of why is there blood on the broken figurine versus the old one? Was that something that stood out as like symbolic?
Well, I wonder. What do you guys think?
She cut herself on the new one.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it was also a little bit more, it seemed like finer material in that particular scene. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Hitchcock version, it just kind of seemed like it was more like stone based. Whereas in this one, it kind of feels like it's finer china.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. See, I was thinking maybe they were going to do something with the blood later. So I guess it added to the suspenseful aspect of it. Where are they going with the blood part?
It might just be that blood was like not just like sex we didn't see back in the day as much. Because Psycho was so, when that movie came out, people were horrified with seeing so much blood. Oh. It was very shocking to viewers. Just like The Exorcist, where people were throwing up in the movie theater because it was too much to handle.
Oh yeah, and then the throwing up in this scene, in this movie, that was new with the Mrs. Van Hopper in the beginning.
I felt for her in that scene.
I love that actress as Mrs. Van Hopper. She's so good.
Oh, she was great. And do you guys watch Handmaid's Tale?
I do.
Yeah. Did you recognize her?
Yeah. That's why I think anything I've seen her after Handmaid's Tale, she's just a really great actress. Like, she can adapt to the role pretty well. So that kind of snooty, like, I'm going to be real prim and proper in front of my guests, and then I'm going to, tell you how awful you were after they leave. Like, she's able to do that really well.
Yes, that was an evil character. She was really mean in this movie. So, yeah. I noticed that.
And, okay, I'll say on that scene, so it seemed more justifiable that she's in bed, that she was not able to chase the lady for going off to her tennis lessons, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So that, I'm sure they took that from the old movie going, why didn't that, like, how would she just let her go for so long? Because she wasn't sick in the first one. So would you agree with that?
She was sick in the first one.
Yeah.
She was?
Yeah. They just didn't show her sick because
okay.
In the book, she had a cold and she was in bed for like 2 or 3 weeks because she had a man flu or something. I don't know. She couldn't get out of bed. What stopped me from getting out of bed?
Yeah, this one I thought it was just a really bad hangover that lasted a few days, but I don't know.
Well, they also had the advantage of like modern technology and like visuals on their side, because when she like wakes up in the Netflix, like it's like brutal. It looked like she just got done like throwing up before she like actually had thrown up, because she's got like dry, crusty like white stuff all over her face.
Yes.
That was nasty. Now, can I also say that the first one, the first movie, the suspense of her being able to talk to I'm really bad with names, you guys. I'm sorry, but I have the name block where I'll remember the scene and the things. But yes, De Winters, Mr. De Winters is in the shower in the first one, and the soon-to-be wife De Winters that we don't know her name. She's trying to tell him that she has to go take the train and is going to be leaving, and she's going to New York. And I felt like the Hitchcock version, there was so much suspense. Is she actually going to be able to tell him before she gets on that train?
Oh yeah.
Versus the newer one felt like less suspense to me. Mm-hmm. Did you guys agree?
I thought that way, yeah, because you can see her like, going back and forth and worrying. It felt a little bit forced in the new one. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure why they wrote it that way, but yeah, I liked the older one better.
Yeah, I got the blood pumping, anxiety going. I'm like, is she gonna get to him? Is she gonna get to him?
Oh, it felt like it almost wasn't gonna happen because she tried so many times, which modern movies tend to just like, kind of rush the plot forward quick. And this one really took time where it wouldn't make sense these days to take 7 minutes for that kind of going upstairs, checking her phone, getting caught, going back downstairs, then going back in and trying again. And then it would never take that long these days. Yeah, it would have totally gotten cut. So I like that. It's a different sense of
Facebook stalk him after that meeting either.
No.
Yeah, right?
This is the 30s here.
Exactly. So what were some other big differences? Oh, you were talking about the lighting in the first one, that really cool. I noticed it in the modern one where they were in the hallway and she was talking to Mrs. Danvers. And do you remember the dark hallway with just a shaft of light hitting their eyes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the cinematography in this one's really rich. There's a scene in the new one where she's in the doctor's office she's just stolen the file, so she's trying to figure out what Rebecca, if she really had a baby or if she was truly dying. The way that scene's really lit caught my eye as well, because it's just has that layer of richness to it that I feel like it helps set it apart from the other one. But you also have the advantage of having the development of a color palette behind you too, so you're able to convey a lot richer tones through the use of color.
Yeah, which was interesting. And I remember that shadowy figure in the doctor's office. So they did a little bit of a noir thing with the detective coming. It was either around the corner or to the door to open it. Did you remember that big shadow of him? It was kind of a cool moment, noir-y looking. But also, we were noticing his mustard suit. Oh, yeah. And we kept commenting on his... What?
So pretty.
I said it was so pretty. I liked it.
It was so beautiful, and it kept coming up. And then he got a little bit more... maybe it was because that was the French Riviera versus being back at home, but his... outfits dulled down a little bit, right? So it might have portrayed the mood of being at the house. I don't know.
Absolutely.
But beautiful color palette for sure.
Yep. One of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about, that as I was making my way through the book and even revisiting throughout both of these versions of the film, is the constant comparisons that our narrator, Mrs. De Winter, is facing against Rebecca. And I thought it's interesting that when you kind of come into a relationship, whether it's dating or friends or even spouses, you kind of have that there are sometimes where you have that unfair advantage of comparison, and that can really break a relationship. And so you can see that the narrator was going through a great deal of just mental anguish, because she's trying her hardest. She clearly does not come from this world, and she just wants to please Maxim, but she's going through just hell almost, basically, because everyone keeps comparing her to Rebecca or keeps bringing up Rebecca, and everywhere she looks it's Rebecca or it's RDW, as everything was monogrammed in the Hitchcock. And I kind of want to ask you guys, how do you guys, in your own experience, kind of have maybe dealt with something like this in either romantic relationships or just friendships.
Yeah.
I could go because I just had a dream last night of I was with someone for 10 years. So it was a long-term relationship. And I just recently reconnected with him after not talking for 5 or 6 years. And he mentioned, I hadn't talked to him in 5 years. And he told me about a girlfriend that he had for a year and a half. And immediately I was like, this whole conversation is supposed to be about me. We haven't talked in so long. Why would you ever bring up anyone else? Are you like, in all of my jealousy, anger came back again, which, of course, logically in 6 years or 5 years, you should have another person in your life. But I have more of that. Probably I'm just a little more jealous. Blame it on the Scorpio thing. I'd like to blame it on that, even if there's no validity there. I'd like to.
Well, I was thinking of the same person for you, Julianne, that he had a famous rock star ex-girlfriend. So when you guys got together, that was
he had dated Gwen Stefani, so I was up against Gwen Stefani. So,
talk about a Rebecca ghost.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a little interesting, and I did look at his email a couple of times and had to check out some Gwen emails and see, and I was like, okay, they're just friends, and they talk about weird, dumb things and not romantic, like how many cookies she ate. I ate a whole box of lemon cookies, and I was like, all right, they're okay, but it was really dumb. But yeah, for a while I was saying this is gonna be rough.
Yeah. Yep. And I happen to be married to someone who has a healthy jealous side. I like to say it's a healthy jealousy. Keeps us on our toes a little bit, but and we both came into the relationship with some long-term exes, and then we both broke up before we got married. We had a couple get-togethers, breakups, get-together, breakup, and we each went back to, did I go back to an ex? No, but he did. So, there were some active exes in our relationship, which was interesting. But,
Did you get really jealous about that? Could you handle that?
At the time, we were both dating other people. So, yeah. But her ghost is still around because I know that was his first, and that was the one he went back to. And so I do wonder.
And you have a ghosty one with him.
I do?
Yes. Because
this is news to her.
Oh
no, because it was a friend of his that she got together with. So he has this idea possibly that a friend of his will somehow swipe you away from him.
That's right.
Currently.
I forgot about that. Yeah, during one of our breakups, I got together with his best friend. Which whoopsies. It was it was his idea. And I thought I would never see my guy again. So I was like, well, it's up to you. It really was a lot like the movie.
His meaning the new guy, yeah.
Right. It was like the movie Pearl Harbor. I almost said Pearl Jam.
I know. I noticed that.
It's like the movie Pearl Harbor. I felt like, okay, he went off to war. I'll be with the best friend because he's the next best thing. Well, lo and behold, he came back. And
whoops.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So there's always a ghost. There is. And it is a big, I guess, shadow that kind of follows you around unless you're super healthy and can talk about all these things, which we're working on more and more. So
yeah,
I think well, even just as women, we compare ourselves to each other without relationships involved. So it's it's hard to kind of not do that, because I would imagine it's the same in the 40s. We just look at each other and we're like, well, wow, they're skinny and gorgeous and tall, and I'm short and dumpy and can't live up to that. But I don't know. I think it's like kind of natural to do that, but also, are you going to be able to get through that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in this case, in the movie, they had class differences too.
Yes, that too.
All this, you'll never be able to run this house. You'll never be able to live up to her. People telling her that to her face. So, it was overt comparisons. And how do you deal with that?
That at that point, it becomes an issue of mental health, because you're basically being told that you as a person have value, but not enough to really matter. And at that point, it becomes a one of the things that I texted my wife as I was going through the book through the first time, and the first time that I got to the ledge scene, which is basically Mrs. Danvers talking to Mrs. De Winter, telling her, you should just jump off the cliff. Like, I mean, it's this dark moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, jump out and
She's evil. That's what I keep saying. She is sinister.
But I feel like that scene in particular, like, just kind of encapsulates the challenges that our narrator goes through. And, I feel like there are some times where, like, I've felt that way, kind of like jumping into like newer positions in old past employments, to where I have the constant comparison of the people's whose job I'm filling or the positions that I'm stepping into. It's like, am I really good enough to be here? And I feel like that arc that Mrs. De Winter goes on throughout the course of this film, maybe not so much in the Netflix series movie, but definitely in Hitchcock and in the original book, you can definitely see that she's fighting, to reclaim and like understand her value as a person, not just as a wife, but as an individual.
Absolutely. Well, the fact that she doesn't even have a name, I mean, that says it all right there. She's an orphan. She has no name. So her whole identity becomes this man and his house, and then Rebecca, yet it's thrown in her face. I mean, and they're almost kind of gaslighting her too, making her feel like she's crazy. She's not going to live up to it. And right, the mental anguish and the fact that she never fought back too, because I think she did realize that this was her life. And if she fought back against Mrs. Danvers too much, she tried to stand up to her, she would lose everything, right? Who would she go to? And she tells her that if you fire me, whatever the threat was, then who's going to pay for your bills? Where will you go? Who will take care of you? So, yeah.
She was saying, evil. I think she was saying if you divorce him. Or
divorce.
Because I was saying why I was like, get rid of this bitch.
Yeah.
Get rid of her. Why aren't they firing her? So I was thinking, did she need her for some reason, or was she just too scared? She fired her in the second one a little sooner after the dress event.
Right. Well, I wrote down the whole scene. She, let's see.
She said, pack your things, and then the fire was the next day.
Oh, yeah. She confronts Mrs. Danvers because she had invited that cousin Jack, to the house when she knew he was banned.
So it took the man. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so she marched up to her, said, you're dismissed. And then she turned it around on her and started to say, well, I could help you. You've never asked. Rebecca was my life, And
that was the more manipulation I thought they portrayed in the second one. Ooh, that woman. Right? Yes.
So then you start to wonder, okay, maybe she will help her.
And then she puts her in the dress that Rebecca wore.
Oh. So awful.
And this woman, her little maid, the girl that helped her, didn't know, or did she know? Was she there?
She knew that Rebecca had worn it, but Mrs. Danvers was like, no, this is what Maxim wants. This will surprise him and everybody will love it. Like she deceived everybody. Yeah.
Right.
So it's like Mrs. Danvers was only after destroying them because she idolized Rebecca.
Right. This is so sad. So I really empathize with the lead character, narrator. And I feel bad. I did a deep dive into narcissism and people who are, women and men being narcissists, which to me, it's the Danvers character is just a classic manipulator, narcissist, sociopath type. And this poor empathetic woman who just wants to fit in. She wants to be a good wife. She wants to, she's just so sweet. And how sweet people get preyed upon. And that drives me crazy. And I'm always like, I just want to jump in there and help. And so you see her mental anguish at the hands of this one woman. And then I say, I wish she could communicate more with her husband to get him on her side earlier. And in the Hitchcock movie, it seemed like there was a lot less communication between the husband and wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but she does really come into her own at the end where, you know, she's able to stand her ground and do the things. I really liked how they kind of portrayed her growth in the second movie. Mm-hmm. Where she's like taking the initiative to go to the doctor's office.
Yes.
Because in the book, you know, they were trying to rule out murder. They weren't suspecting him of murder. So it was like everybody went to the doctor's office and it was just a casual conversation. Yeah. And they figured out that she had cancer. And so it was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Whereas in this movie, and she does, like in the book, she does kind of, you know, get to stand on her own 2 feet and be, you know, a woman.
But I think also too, some of that is more modernly available and like, whereas in the 1940s and the 1930s, when the book was originally published, you got
to be a good housewife.
Yeah, you got to be a good housewife. Like that was kind of the motive of women at that time. And now you're in a post-Me Too movement. You're in this Wonder Woman, Black Widow, Ghost in the Shell, like these strong tentpole blockbuster female-led films, and women are proving themselves. And that's one thing that I will say about this more modern take on the character. I loved Lily James as the narrator, Mrs. De Winter, in this. She came out and just be her own, and there are a couple of things that they tweak within the last half of the movie from the source material, but I think that it's needed because you need that more modern take, because while I do appreciate Hitchcock so much, there are things and themes that we're starting to see in older movies that don't stand up as well in today's world.
Yeah, I could see that. Sorry, I just caught a note out of the corner of my eye here too. What about the bird flocks that we saw a couple times? Was that symbolic to you guys? Did you notice?
Yes, I felt like it was like a bad omen. Like, oh, like, you know,
kind
a
of
murder of crows. What's gonna happen?
But they didn't actually do anything with it. Like you saw it like once or twice, and it just kind of like the first time you're like, oh, that's cool. Like it's intentional because the camera's focusing on it. Ben Wheatley is the director of the second one, and so then they focus on it a second time. And you're like, well, this must mean something, because if you're seeing something more than once, clearly it has purpose. And they never kind of do anything with it. So I think maybe out of everything, it might just be that it's like bad omen. But this seems like the wrong place to put a bad omen.
Yeah, it was bad on its own. And maybe he was paying homage to the birds. Another Hitchcock-y thing.
Well, yeah, since you said they were both written by the same author, too, that could make sense. I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, sorry, that was my side note. I did love in the end when the couple escapes to Cairo, and it's kind of like they're having a second honeymoon, and they finally are rid of this house, right? This Mandalay is really like this big, horrible, ghosty character in a way that finally gets burned down. So I guess Mrs. Danvers did them a favor with that. They could start a new life and start fresh. And I liked how she came out in that too. She seems so much stronger, and I really like that theme as well.
I think, and I don't know, maybe you can speak to this. I feel like being married and having gone through we've never gone through anything major, but like we've had our ups and downs and like scares and stuff like that, to where it's made us stronger. And so sometimes when you go through fire, especially in marriage, it refines you to be a stronger person in the end of it. As long if you work through it and if you fight for it.
Absolutely. Isn't that true? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We went through, we built a house together. So that was our big challenge. Didn't have any. It wasn't a big scary thing. It was just, are we going to survive this? Because many couples don't, and we did pretty well. So
That's good.
not that
Awesome.
it's the same, but house theme. There we go.
Yeah.
Hey, also, did you guys, which death did you enjoy better? Like, what do you think was more effective?
I
The first movie.
personally liked the first movie where she burns herself in the house because that's, accurate with the book.
Yeah.
And I feel like it kind of like complements like death by water versus death by fire. But also I liked how they updated it. Like I prefer the original way, but like, she's going to throw herself into the sea and be one with her best friend again. Like, okay, I can get the symbolism of that.
It's also a lot more poetic in that way too.
Dramatic, you mean?
Yeah, no,
Eye rolling
poetic.
dramatic.
It's but the movie, at least the more modern one, it has a lot more presence with water. It feels like because that's where it's almost bookended by the water because the title sequence and everything is water.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That's true.
And I will say though, I think she could have fallen a little farther for dramatic effect.
Yeah,
it
right.
felt like
I
she
was
was kind of like plopped in the water, and then all of a sudden she's sinking 80 feet
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah, make her hit a rock or something on the way
Something.
down.
We could have had a little more of a, oh, this is happening.
I was
I
like,
know.
is that cliff high enough for her to die when she hits the water?
Yeah, it's like, well, you could just take a nice swim at that point. I don't
Right.
know.
Little Hawaiian cliff diving.
Andy Muschietti's It has taught us anything is that cliffs that high are only for swimming.
Aha, look at that.
There you go.
Interesting.
Now you said to jump into the sea to be with her best friend. Now I picked up a little possible lesbian vibe.
me too.
Did you? Okay. I wasn't. No.
I don't know because the way that she talks about being with Rebecca since it was a childhood, right?
Mhm.
She was
They're
like
basically
16.
handmade for like the entire her life.
Yeah, so like at that point, it is almost a kind of a mother going through postpartum depression and trying to just want to be reunited with her child almost because she was almost like a surrogate mother the way that they portrayed her in the second one.
Yeah.
That's true, but then they kind of hinted that it felt a little like heated sexually the way she was saying it towards the end of the movie. She's going, I loved her more than she was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was. And even in the Hitchcock version, when she's holding up the negligee and you can see through it and they're talking about her figure and how you could see everything. And then the hair brushing scene where, she would ask me to brush her hair and then he would come in. It almost sounded like, wait, what's going on in this bedroom?
I
don't
wonder
know.
if it could have been motherly with also crossing the line because she wasn't the actual mother.
Right.
That maybe
She is.
lines got blurred because she was like way too dedicated to this person. I don't know.
Right. And she was dedicated to the house too and keeping that room pristine, which I was happy to see that they dressed the room the same in the original movie in the Netflix version. Did you notice how similar it was?
Oh yeah, it was almost spot on.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. That was good. But
it's a nice little nod there.
yeah, and the fact that in the original Mrs. Danvers burned herself in the house, it was almost like she went down with the ship. It was her sinking in a ship. She's like
Right.
the captain going to stay
I
on the
did
Titanic.
kind of like the burning alive.
I don't know. It was more dramatic, I thought.
Yeah. You just to see her in the window too. How creepy is that? Just to
Right.
see someone burning.
Oh,
in
I
the
thought that
window.
was the creepiest thing. I loved it.
See,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, she was a creepier version.
she was pretty
maybe
freaking creepy.
Maybe you win. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I mean, she did not break character. She was a creep the whole way through. So that's
Absolutely.
for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then, this was another just quick plot thing. In the second movie, wouldn't they have discovered a bullet hole in the body, or was it too decomposed at that point?
I think because it had been over a year, so I think at that point, like water decomposes a body in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
I've watched a lot of Bones.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. True crime over here.
So either way you spin it, whether it was the original body that they diagnosed 2 months after she disappeared or a year, it's still too far gone to really make an adequate decision.
I mean, unless the bullet hit her bones and they were really examining the bones, but I feel like in the 40s, it's not that big of a deal.
Right. Well, and then they saw the damage of the ship, or the boat, which gave them their answer that they needed, which was she finally committed suicide, I guess, right? Is what they deemed it.
Yeah, because she had cancer and she wasn't going to live with herself. But that was like my thing is when Josh was listening to the audiobook, he was like, what do you mean Max killed her? And I'm like, well, it was more like suicide by cop, you know, like she didn't want to live. So she like was like, shoot me, I dare you. And he's like in a rage. So he did.
So that was very different then. What did you like better? Because the first one was that she fell, hit her head, and then he took her out in the boat, and then he poked the holes and she died.
Right.
But so she had really tripped, right?
Did she shoot herself in the book? Or was it a bullet in the book, or was it?
No, it was just the boat in the book.
Yeah,
Well,
I thought it was like,
dead.
Well, the Hitchcock movie said she fell
And hit her head. Yeah.
hit her head, and then she was dying, and then he took her out to the boat.
Which I think is a little bit closer to the book.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
And I think for me, like I prefer kind of I prefer a little bit more of the more modern take where she got shot. And I say that solely because it seems more in line with her character, because as whether you're talking about Laurence Olivier or Armie-Hammer, the way that their characters are monologuing about how cunning she was and how she kind of got the last laugh, like she was smart enough to kind of be like pull a Amazing Amy and have her husband framed for her murder.
Yeah. I don't know who Amazing Amy is, by the way. Who's that?
Gone Girl.
Oh,
right. Okay. So
I did look it up. In the book, he shot her.
Oh,
okay.
So
interesting.
that was more accurate.
There you go.
And that would make more sense that if that's the secret rage that everyone's talking about, because in Hitchcock just to trip, it's like he obviously snapped at that moment,
Yeah,
right?
like he shoved her and she fell and cracked her head wide open. But
yeah,
I feel like if you're in a rage and you have a gun, you would use a gun before you shoved somebody.
right? I mean, there's so many passion murders. That's like a third of all murders or something, or domestic and passion based. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy to like really factor in domestic violence and kind of unhappy and abusive relationships that we see modern day speaking. And I think that Rebecca prompts those conversations to be had. And kind of you can also kind of see like what emotional damage can do. And I think that also too, one thing that this movie does really well, obviously being the only guy on this podcast, I related to this personally, was the you can kind of see the years of emotional and psychological abuse that Rebecca had on Maxim, portrayed a little bit better in the Netflix one, to where like when he finally opens up to the narrator about killing Rebecca, he almost kind of seems like it's this like sigh of relief, because he's giving the entire history of her unfaithfulness and kind of like how they would basically masquerade themselves throughout the public events and these parties and these lavish events, and how she just was really despicable behind doors. And like that's a dangerous place to be in, I feel like, for a man, for one, but two, for really anybody, because toxic relationships are terrible for your mental health, and they can bring you to some really dark places. And we see that evidence of that in Maxim, even considering killing his wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why this is not so far off, and that's why I'm very into the dynamics of relationships. And so this one, in the first version, I was saying, oh, she's a submissive 1940s housewife type and how sad it was back in the day. But then I actually like that they got on the same page together and they were sort of in it together, even though it was about potential murder. I go, oh, okay, this wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, because I'll see a lot of movies from back then and I have this little feminist part of me that comes out and goes, "Urgh," and it's no longer a cute old movie. The way that you kind of, Joelle will watch those movies and have more of a nostalgic feel for it. And I just think of all the abuse that was probably, or the male dominance that was happening. But,
and I buy Hollywood stories, hook, line, and sinker, June Cleaver over here. I'm sorry.
I think I wish I had a brain that my brain goes right to dynamics and oppression and who's happy, who's not, and all the subtleties. And I don't even know what your question was. I just sort of ranted. But
well, I love that they did kind of make the woman, Rebecca, she was the villain. She really was the villain. And, that she could plot and tell Max that no one would believe you if I got pregnant. They would think it's yours. And just kind of the
entrapment,
manipulation, right, that must really happen in real life. And
I know people too that have trapped their husbands through pregnancy by poking holes in the diaphragm. So
wow, really?
One person in particular,
Wow. So it is a nice nod to the fact that domestic violence and abuse and psychological abuse can go both ways. Can be from either partner, really.
Yeah, we actually have one of our staff has actually, not to the dark level, but he went through a really emotional, terrible, just psychological abuse in a former relationship that he's talked about on a couple of our episodes, Gone Girl in particular. And, it just stands to reason that, nobody's really safe. And I love that you brought up about Rebecca being the antagonist. There's a line that Mrs. Danvers says in this new one to the narrator, and she says, "She's still here. Can you feel her?" And honestly, I was kind of hoping, the horror guy in me was hoping for like a little ghost story coming in, but it didn't happen. But I think that, when you have the depths of abuse, that it's not just like, you suck the poison out and you move on. It's like those scars, they last with you for years to come. They affect future relationships. They affect, potential spouses, family dynamics, workplace environments, that they do have deep claws that really do affect you moving forward.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, these are the scars. I mean, the fact that we have so many love songs and movies about love and anguish about love and murder over love and all of the psychological trauma it causes, and just from being hurt and what happens after that when you say, okay, I'm never going to let anyone hurt me again. That guy was an awful boyfriend for a couple of years, and that carries on to every relationship. Now you're shut down. And how do you open back up and trust someone again? It can be extremely psychologically
and
damaging.
Then as a parent too, how are you portraying your relationship to your children? Based on your past damage, perhaps you don't feel as open to show emotions or physicality, and so your kids grow up and repeat the cycle. So yeah, it's all so important.
And neither one of us are parents. I can't speak to you guys. I think you guys have kids, but Eric and I, we aren't parents. And but one of the things that we've talked about and discussed is, having nieces and nephews. We understand that you have to watch what you say and watch what you do around kids, because they're very impressionable. And if you don't break the cycle in your own mental health habits now and develop good ones, then they are prone to repeat the cycles that you're currently in.
Yep. Heck yeah. I have 3 kids, and when Julianne's staying here, sometimes she forgets and, will let loose a little bit of the cussing and stuff, whatever. But sometimes it's more of the women being self-deprecating, and, I want her to grow up a strong little girl, a strong woman.
Yeah, I've commented like on gaining weight in this COVID time, or like, ooh, there's a little muffin top thing happening, and just I'll say it about myself in front of her, but she's super impressed. I forget.
Yeah. And so I kind of give her a little side eye, like, let's go
which is great because we'll break that total body shaming that has been around for females forever. It's so sad.
Yep. Yeah. So it's all so important. It really is. I mean, it just, yeah. We all probably need therapy, right?
I have a therapist. I like her. It's fun.
See, what would they have done with therapy back in the 40s or 30s?
They wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
Freud thought women had a wandering uterus, that like traveled around their legs, causing hysteria in the brain, and it was really bad. That wasn't that long ago.
Right. This is true.
Well,
Yeah, I thought that uterine cancer was pretty advanced of a diagnosis back in the day. It's very specific.
For the movie, right? That was the second movie?
Yeah, she had uterine cancer in the book and in the first movie as well.
Wow.
I didn't realize. Yeah.
Or I thought it was the second movie, but not the first movie. Did they say it in the first? Unless I tuned out.
Well, I know it was cancer. I didn't know
it was cancer in the first two.
Uterine.
Yeah.
I don't know if they specified it was uterine, but they did specify in the book that it was uterine cancer.
Got it. Okay. Wow.
Well, they didn't say cancer. They said a malignant growth in the uterus or something like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, all right. I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of Victims and Villains. Hit us with those socials one more time for our listeners.
Sure, no problem. We are at mouse-and-weens.com. You have to spell it all out with WEENS at the end. And all of our social media is the same thing, at Mouse and Weens. And just Google us. You can find us everywhere, wherever you listen to podcasts.
And thank you guys so much for being here.
Absolutely.
We had a great time. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. You guys are great.
Thanks.
Yeah. So you guys can find us everywhere at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, and Twitch. And you guys can find us all of our socials, all of our suicide prevention resources, and much more at victimsandvillains.net. But until next time, remember to keep talking nerd, talking hope, speaking nothing else.